Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. Give everybody a chance to find their way over to our meeting.
While you're waiting, why don't you let us know where you're from in the chat? All
Welcome,
right.
Cindy, fellow Washingtonian.
She's in your neck of the woods.
I don't know. Pacific Northwest is where it's at. They're having an exciting May. If you want, you can put the latest book you're reading. Figure out which one I'm reading now.
Yeah, right.
I'll start it off. Come on, tell me what book I'm reading. Oh, that's what I'm reading. I can put them on. Where do we go?
We're here.
Went too far.
I put my hand on the keyboard and it
Yeah,
went.
don't do that.
Yeah, right.
I'm reading Genius Makers, Dean.
Cool. You have to tell me about that one.
It's good. It's like the history of AI through
You're finding
interesting
out that
people.
there's nothing new under the sun, just
No, no,
cheaper,
yeah, of
faster to.
course, yeah. It goes back to early days in the 70s with Jeff
Yep.
Hinton and his
Mm-hmm.
neural networks that no one bought into. And
Yep.
Minsky told him he was full of garbage.
Yep.
So welcome everybody. We were telling everybody to put in where they're from as we waited to get our attendees in a good number and get started. So if you can put where you're dialing in from, that'd be great. What FF Leaf is. Cody from Raleigh. See, someone from your neck of the woods, Dean.
I know, right?
Got one of each of ours. Welcome, Laura.
You even got a meetup in Durham nearby.
Ooh.
Hopefully, it's got to check to see if there's a Bulls game going on. Otherwise, parking's going to be murder.
Oops, sorry. That was my Mickey
Okay.
Mouse. My
I think
Mickey
we can
Mouse
pro
watch.
Yeah, I think we can probably get rolling.
Yeah, let's get going. You can run the slides.
Alrighty.
Welcome. So, welcome to our latest in our series. Today, we're going to be talking about, if I can find the title of things, driving organic growth through innovation. And your speakers today, you've got myself as sort of the moderator and informer at some level, and then our esteemed leader is Dean Peters. He's going to be guiding you through how to understand how to truly drive organic growth. You don't have to go buy companies to get growth. We're going to figure out how you do it with innovation. And so
Right,
before
and
we go ahead.
I was going to say, Kenny, introduce yourself. Let us know a little about you.
Oh yeah, so I can introduce myself. I'm Kenny Kranseler. I'm a consultant and trainer here at Productside. Have been for about the last 7 years or so. Before that, spent a long time doing everything in product management at places like Amazon and Microsoft, but actually started my product management career at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dean, you
Awesome.
can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dean Peters. Like Kenny said, I'm on the other side of the coast here. I've been in product management 20 years. For that, software engineering for about 12 to 15, depending on how you count it. And the last 4 years, as of next week, 4 years here at Productside, teaching and consulting as well. So in a variety of fields and domains.
Excellent. Let's move on. Click it. There you go. So let me start. I'm going to welcome you all and give a little introduction to Productside, the sponsor of this, before we dive in. We're the sort of the team behind today's webinar. Um, and one of the things we know at Productside is we know it's really hard to deliver products that people not only use but actually love using. So those of us as product managers, whether it's aligning stakeholders, figuring out what customer needs, managing the endless lists of backlogs, we've seen it all. And we're here to help individual product managers and teams of product managers become their outcome-driven product partner. And sort of what sets us apart was we don't just provide solutions or standard out of the box ideas, but we tailor them to the unique challenges that individuals have and teams have. And as part of that, we make sure that we work to transform your organization, your team, to become product led. So everything from strategy to execution. We're there helping guide you from where you are today to where you hope to become. And as I noted, we know your challenges are unique, so our solutions are as well. We'll tailor our solutions to your specific needs and not just give you an out of the box generic idea of how to do product management. And we got folks like Dean and I who have scars on our back to show we've been doing this a long time. And you can consider us an extension of your team that is obsessed with making you all successful. And we are truly thrilled to have you here with us today. So we have opportunity to dive in and help your product team thrive. And before we dive in, I want to talk about how we'll keep this session hopefully somewhat interactive. Um, the first question I always get from folks is, can I watch this recording later? Is this being recorded and sent to me? And the answer is a absolute yes. We will send everybody who attends or everybody even who signed up a link to the recording after the webinar ends. But during the session, we really want to hear from you. There's a Q&A feature in Zoom that you all can use to ask questions. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the webinar as Dean is doing his presentation. So don't feel like you have to wait until the end before you ask all your questions. If you throw them into that Q&A, I will not be afraid to interrupt Dean at any point. We love engaging with folks in real time. You'll also see that there's a chat feature inside of Zoom, which you can connect to your fellow product managers that are on this webinar. You can ask them questions, share your experiences, or just cheer each other or Dean on. The chat's a place for us to learn from each other as part of this idea. So let's keep the energy up. Don't hold back. This is your time to get the most out of today's session. And one last thing before we dive into the content, I want to take a moment to invite you to connect with Productside. Hope we have a LinkedIn group, and our LinkedIn page is more than just a place to follow us. It's really a community. And when you join it, you'll get access to things like leadership best practices that can hopefully inspire your own personal growth. You'll get access to conversations about what that critical role of product management is, and hopefully some ideas and concepts and tips to make it more impactful for you. And really just provide an opportunity for you to network with other product management professionals who share some of the same challenges, goals, objectives that you have. You can either use that QR code on the side, on the slide, or I am sure we've put a link to it in the chat somewhere. So we'd love to hear your thoughts, swap some ideas, keep the conversation going after today's session, so we can all work together to build a stronger product management community. And with that, I will let Dean take over and introduce us to how you drive organic growth through innovation.
And thanks for that, Kenny, there. And thanks everyone for attending. I know your time is valuable, and I really appreciate you joining us here. Please, comments, Q&A, use them, all right? We love to, and we thrive on that. But let me give you an agenda real quick. Some introductions to housekeeping, which means you're one slide away from the meat and potatoes. So just hang in there. We're going to talk about organic growth and how it's defined because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but doesn't get defined very much. We're going to talk about innovation as a growth driver. So we're going to show you innovation from a slightly different lens. It's a growth through innovation or innovation through growth, and either way you slice it, it's going to be innovation from a different lens that you possibly have seen it before. We're going to talk about how you can execute that and how you can frame it by taking a portion of the McKinsey Growth Pyramid and walking you through four of the key organic growth motions. We're going to show you how to choose your own path. We've even got a little demo of how we're going to do that with a skill in Claude. And even at the end, we'll share that skill with you as we have offers and Q&A. But let's dive into the good stuff because we're here to talk about organic growth and let's talk about defining it. Because this term, again, gets thrown around a lot, it gets confused a lot. And I thought, you know what? We probably need to talk about what it's not and what it is. And I think Kenny, you and I, when we were talking on this topic, we had a lot of conversations because both of us, we've seen companies that have run out and just used, flung a bunch of features, cranked up the feature factory, threw a bunch of features out there, and the market said, meh. Or they acquired a company or bolted on a technology, and they wound up with this very fragile and brittle Frankensoft of a monstrosity that actually drove negative growth. And I think for those of us who are in the ground floor building it here in product, it can be even more career limiting if we don't get a grip around it. So again, we want to make sure that we understand we're not talking about growth by acquiring other companies or technologies, not about tweaking the price to extract as much value as we can out of the current base, not about shipping just features and using hope as a strategy. And it's certainly not just doing AI as theater, which we are seeing quite a bit. In fact, I think it was in 2024 and 2025, the numbers are in, and a lot of those initiatives, either zero growth or negative growth. Growth is about growing from your internal capabilities. It's about expanding how your users and customers adopt your product, retain the product, and how you grow the reach, both through your product and through your services you offer. It's about creating repeatable growth loops because you want to continually grow. So it's a muscle that you need to keep re-exercising as your organization grows. And it also is about strengthening your core business as well. So all these are elements of organic growth. And just to drive the story home, we want to talk about what a bad example is, or as I like to say, a good example of bad organic growth. And so Sonos, if you're not familiar with them, they pioneered and dominated multi-room wireless audio products like wireless smart speakers, amplifiers, audio components, home theater setups, portable on the go, and it was like they were doing pretty good. And then somewhere between what do you call it, 2023 and 2024, they decided, you know what? We need to build an app for this because they thought that by moving into an app, they would change their channel and they would change how they did things here. So they acquired a company called Mate, M-A-Y-H-T, which they bought for about $100 million. And that's the beginning of the fall because that creates a debt situation. So now it's like, well, we got to work with our prices. So they started raising their prices shortly after that, and that wasn't working. And they said, well, let's disrupt the market and we'll design an app for a whole new experience here. And the experience was so whole wonderful new that in 2024, at the end of 2024, the CEO had to send out an apology note to the public. In fact, here's the note here. We recognize the app launched in May 7th, caused significant problems for you. Please read the letter from the CEO about our progress and commitment. I mean, you really don't want to message the market. So if you're looking for an example of negative growth by reverse engineering and going backwards with organic growth, this is probably a great example of bad growth. And I think, Kenny, you've
Yeah,
probably
growth
seen
through
some.
acquisition is tough.
Yeah, growth. Well,
Those of us who've been
yeah. You accumulate not just the monetary debt, you accumulate the technical debt. And so
Yeah,
again, it
and
becomes this race.
you accumulate the personal debt too, because
Yeah,
getting everybody to agree with to work
that the
together is not
cultures.
always so easy.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about organic growth because we don't want that sort of a messy house. And we actually want to talk about what it is. And a really, really good example that many of us are familiar with Figma. So Figma, when it came out around 2016, really focused on the designer experience. But they had really good product management and figured out, like, they're going to want to share these files. So why don't we make part of our platform surface for Figma is that they can share these diagrams with other people they work with. And all these people have to do is sign up for the free account. I don't have to owe us any money, whatever. They can just look at it. And so that way the designers could share their work. So already they started thinking about how do we start getting more people here. By the time 2021 rolled around, they had taken their product surface and expanded it into FigJam because it was based on the question, all right, who works adjacent with product managers? Well, we know, not product managers, with developers and designers. And product managers came up. And how do they normally collaborate with designers? On a whiteboard. What's FigJam? It's that collaborative whiteboard. Then they said, all right, well, who else is working with product managers and who else is adjacent to designers? Engineers. So then you see the dev mode coming out. So it was a very intentional way of not so much changing their product, but changing the product surface to bring in people who are adjacent to the original customer there. So that was just a really good play. So you have that example versus Sonos. Now, with that definition, and with those two examples, it's time for a quiz. Oh, I mean poll. So we want to take a quick poll. And Kimberly, if you can light up the poll, you get to pick one of these that describes where your organization is looking for growth right now. You're looking to purchase and acquire companies, increase prices and add new varieties, create new products and services, reaching new types of customers in new regions or markets, or looking for new ways that customers discover and buy.
We'll give folks a couple more seconds to fill in their survey.
Yep. All right. All right. Get about another few seconds here. Where these polls are anonymous, we will not share what you put in. We'll just share the end
We
results.
can probably stop it there and we'll
Yeah, we'll
share
stop it
back the
there. We're going to
results
share the
out.
results. So I'm sharing the
Oh,
results. Hopefully you can see
oh no,
them.
someone else. Oh, you shared it.
Okay. Alrighty. So looks
So
like, go ahead, Kenny.
yeah, so it looks like most of the people are doing it, are looking for innovation to drive their growth at least, which
Yeah,
is a good
which
thing.
is it's a good thing here. Like I said, so we're not seeing anyone falling into that trap, and that's a good thing here. Um, Now you might be wondering, how am I going to have conversations at work? So if you answered and you were still not sure, or you know what you want and don't know how to drive the conversation, we've already got our first freebie here on the webinar. Kimberly's going to share a link. That is the Product Manager Starter Kit. It is 3 plays from our Product Manager's Playbook. It includes a outcome strategy guided conversation. It includes stakeholder alignment worksheet. It includes a positioning statement here. We really want to focus on that first one here because it's going to give you a path. It's going to give you some structure to how to run a conversation around a growth strategy as well as other strategies here. Did you want any other color to that, Kenny?
No, I think that's perfect. If you don't know where you're going and how to get there and driving the strategy, then where and how in the questions that we're going to pose for you for the rest of the webinar won't make a lot of sense. So
Right.
first you have
Okay.
to figure out what the objectives of the company are. So it's a good place to start.
So welcome to that playbook. We're glad to give you that starter pack there to help you have those strategic conversations. Now we defined growth in terms of organic growth. Let's define what innovative growth is. And so again, we want to look at the question, how can innovation help us grow? So it's not what innovations can we add? It's not what innovative product is out there, technology. It's how can we look at growth innovatively? How can we look at growth through an innovative lens to help grow the organization, whether it's growing revenue, whether it's growing market share, whether it's growing the lifetime value of our existing customer base? How do we help that? So that means that what innovation is a series of informed bets. It's taking what you know about the market to create new value. It's about creating these adoption loops. So you're not launching features here. What you're doing is you're driving campaigns of getting people to adopt the product to make it part of their daily work here. We're trying to make this so these are informed bets, as I said before, to move revenue, adoption, and retention. What it's not is a the feature factory of busyness, where you're just slinging features and putting using your roadmap like a Gantt chart just to sit there and say, "Hey, by the end of this quarter, we'll have delivered 50 new features." And you ask the question, "Well, how do those features move the needle?" And you hear crickets. It's not about adding AI, or what I like to call yet another chatbot. Like I said, 2024 and 2025 have shown how the needles are either not moving, or moving in an inverse direction. And we want to make sure that we treat this as a creative exercise, but not one that skips the evidence here. So a lot of this is in being in data informed. Now, I've given you the definition, and maybe the question you're coming to mind is, okay, I mostly agree with this definition here, but how? Right? Is there some type of framework that we can tap into? Is there some way that can give me some guidance on how to run these innovation plays? Kenny, I think we've got that, don't you? And so
Yeah, we do. We got some ideas.
we have some ideas, and the ideas are going to come from the McKinsey Growth Pyramid, which actually came out of the original McKinsey Growth Steps. If you're as old as I am, you remember the steps, and they made them into a pyramid. The reason they made them a pyramid instead of steps was just for a visual reason, because you'll notice that of these 7 steps, and I won't read them off to you. You can scan pretty quick. They are stacked in order of low risk to high. But the other thing they wanted to do was say you really need to have your existing product and customers figured out before you move on to existing products with new customers, before you move on existing products into new geographies, before you think about existing products with new delivery approaches, before you think about a new product going into newer markets here. And so with this pyramid here, it gives us some bit of a framework on how to approach this here. Now, since we're talking about organic, we're really just going to focus on the middle 4 of this sandwich here. So at the very top, like I said, you've got the whole disruptive type of play, the whole carving out your own market. At the bottom here, it's really knowing your product market fit. So we're not really going to get into this at this point. These already need to be used. This product, understanding your market with your existing customers, you already should have your product figured out for the market it's in. And it is really risky to try to create new markets or new business models without having these other aspects figured out to some degree. You've worked with us before, Kenny. I know you're doing some studying and reading up on this.
I want to highlight one of those points you put out, which is that rising risk level as you go up this pyramid. So the pyramid is probably, how often or how much you're actually going to do it. So as you go up the pyramid, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for these growth potential. But also the risk changes, and that
Yep.
risk is two-sided, right? Risk
Yep.
also implies reward. So there are more bad things that can happen as you rise up the pyramid, but potentially also more good things. So the
And
return, the return gets higher. So you're making bigger bets essentially.
And fortunately, we said doing organic growth and organic innovation is a data informed play. So you can reduce that risk, or at least, blunt
Mhm.
that risk. So the question then becomes, how will you innovate on customers, on geographies, on channels, and on products here? So we're going to talk about that first slice of that pyramid, well, actually level 2 of that pyramid. Remember, we're already assuming level 1, product or market fit, has already been figured out. So now we want to talk about new customers in existing markets versus existing customers in existing markets. We want to talk about adjacent customers. And it is really linchpinned on two concepts here where we, of course, have to use acronyms just to make it more convoluted. So there's two acronyms you see here that I want to walk through because they're very important to this. First is ICP. It's interesting, Kenny. I've come up through the technical ranks, so I find a lot of product managers also coming up through the technical ranks who don't necessarily understand that term. And then when I explain it, they say, "Oh, it's just personas." I say, "It's personas plus." And if you don't know what that plus means, why don't you have a conversation with someone with your marketing group about ICP? And then maybe have conversations with people in sales on that. What you're likely going to find is both groups are close to each other, but maybe not aligned. And if you ask around your own groups of product managers, you might just find out how many people also don't know what that acronym means or what it infers. You really need to have this ICP figured out already because you already had product market fit figured out. But what this step is now saying is your entire your total addressable and your service addressable market are not exclusive to this profile. That these
Hey
people,
Dean, should we
yeah,
tell? Should we tell? Hey Dean, should we tell them what ICP stands for?
yeah, ideal customer profile. Yeah, I did, but I'll say it again. Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
the
catch
ideal
it.
customer. Yeah, ideal customer profile. It is the specific customer your products aim for. All right, and where your bread and butter is initially. And those people are people within organizations or work groups who are trusted. So when they speak of your product word of mouth, WOM is the other acronym. Now people you are basically now using these people or not using them. You're putting these people in a position where they can become your champions of your product here. That's what Figma did by having designers share what they did with product managers. So by the time FigJam came out, the pump was already primed for product managers who want to dive in. So what really the way you play this game here is you look left of your ideal customer profile, you look right of them, maybe up and down, say who works with them on a day-to-day basis, who interacts with them on a day-to-day basis, who is part of their workflows here. So, for example, we'll use the Figma example here. The designer, well, they work with product managers, and product managers work with product teams. So then, and they work with design teams, and design teams sometimes work with support, and support sometimes work with DevOps, and so DevOps work with leadership. And all of a sudden, this product now starts growing, not because you've changed the product so much, but that you've created the product as a platform for your ideal customer profile to create a word of mouth movement for you within the organization. You might have, Kenny, at least that's the way I see it. You might have a slightly different definition.
No, I mean, I think you're right, but I want to talk about one of those things you said. Whereas you're reaching new customers, you may have to impact the product to better suit those new customers.
Yeah,
In the Figma example, we said that the product manager has slightly different needs than the designer. So we
yeah.
had to flex the product to meet the core needs that made it more applicable for those product managers, for example.
And I
So
think that's an important distinction.
rather than creating features to drive your product, you're creating new customers to drive what those feature needs are in your product,
Right.
the
I
needs
like
of
how you
those
put that there.
customers.
In fact, we've had conversations with organizations where it's, when I talk to some product managers, tell me about your product and tell me how it's where how the people get to their first win, how they tell others, how they share. And they haven't thought about that and said, if you think about that too late, because you're right, Kenny, it's going to either require a little change or a lot of change, depending on how much you didn't think about it early on. So as you're early in your product is probably the best time to think about. The second, it's like planting a tree. When's the best time to think about this play? Well, it's 20 years ago. Okay, that's water under the bridge. The next best time to plant your tree is today. All right. So let's give you a good example of this. Slack is another success story here. I remember back in the day when Slack was just for engineers. All right. Who sits next to engineers? Well, they got similar workflows to the people in DevOps. They got sim who has similar workflows to people in product and in what do you call it, design, who have perhaps connections with people in marketing and in sales, who have connections with people in customer success and support. And what this little product that started with teams wound up doing was looking left and looking right and saying, well, who else could be part of these conversations? And so the platform basically answered the question, where else in the world might Waldo use our product? Now it's part of a corporate infrastructure, so much so that large products like Microsoft Teams try to replicate it as well. So let's look at the next question. So here's my next question here. Once you've got this figured out, let's say you've got it figured out for your corporations there in Canada. All right. Well, how do I get this, to move? How do I take my product that I've got working in Montreal and make it work in Madrid? You just can't grab Google Translate or some other translator program and basically just what do you call it, localize all your labels here. We've seen that done disastrously. And the reason why that fails is for the larger reason why localization is only the beginning, not the end of a move of moving into new geographies. If you've ever been through a localization effort, you soon realize that, oh my gosh, this is more than just words that we're translating. We're actually translating cultures, how people do things. For example, regulations are different in other countries. Payment, the way they do payments is different. The way they treat money, the way they do business, the way the cultures are structured, the what do you call it? All the different colloquialisms that some things don't translate here. So just like for the new customer in the existing product was looking left and looking right at the person's neighbors working next to them, this is looking in regionally, okay, where might this product also work if I do understand the culture, if I do take the time to understand where this is going here, where the product to market fit might be slightly different here. And I think a good example of that is Spotify, which started in Nordic regions, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, moved into Germany, then to France, and to Great Britain. You'll notice they took their good time going to the States because they realized that music culture in the States versus in Northern Europe is very different. Not just from what people listen to, licensing was very different, which meant there's all sorts of potential compliance type of issues they might be up against here. But there's also music being very cultural here. This is why this is such a good example. Because even in the United States, I mean, Kenny, you're all the way out there on the West Coast. I'm over here, in the Southeast. I would imagine that the music cultures are probably significantly different enough. We could treat them like separate countries.
Yeah, you all probably don't like grunge out there, do you?
Then there you go. So my point being is, and Spotify did this really well. They actually put people and feet on the ground to work with local artists. Now, here's the other thing they did, Kenny, which I thought was really clever. They didn't just create a free tier to create a platform service. We hear a product-led growth. So every time you say product-led growth or product-led acquisition, we think, oh, well, that means having 3 payment tiers. That's a small part of it. What Spotify got right was saying, hey, if we could lean in to the free version, we could capture data from these local locations here by using the ad-supported free feature. So people could then they could start collecting data on, okay, well, what are people in Raleigh, North Carolina listening to that's different from what you're listening to up there in the Pacific Northwest versus what, some of my friends over there in Milan are listening to versus Madrid versus Montreal. And so they did that very strategically. So they actually made a couple of very clever plays there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well, or you have some other examples you might have in mind.
Yeah, I oftentimes I think back to Dell computers when they first came out. They were very focused on the U.S. market and selling computers in the U.S. And then suddenly the first place Michael Dell wanted to go was Japan. And it was like, okay, that should be easy, no problem. We can, translate a few things, but it got complicated. Power was very different in Japan and how they plugged the darn thing in. The keyboard was fundamentally very different. The distribution channels, how people finance their computers, all fundamentally the whole business proposition of how they went to market and what that
Right.
computer looked like when they went to the Japan market should be simple, but it can oftentimes be a little more complex in terms of how you do it, and you need to plan for it.
Right. I like that because that's an example of again, this is localizate the localization sort of hope as a strategy type approach. Like, well, we'll just translate it and not realizing there's nuance there. And so you're seeing through our previous example with Slack, through this example here with Spotify, through Figma, these organizations figured out how to use their product and how to use their research as repeatable, resilient patterns. They effectively created playbooks on this. And, some of those playbooks also meant expanding and changing, as you said, where the product is sold and how the product is sold. So this is where we get to product-led acquisition, again, which everyone thinks about being, oh, that just means three tiers. No, that's just a small part of it. Well, we often think about, like I said, you think about the paid versus premium or free, paid, premium, but it also means using your product surface to get visibility to an audience that was previously unreachable. It means you can figure out a way to invite potential customers through acts of collaboration. That's what Figma was doing with part of their play there. I think Loom was another good example of this, where they did that as well, where the creators of the video could share it with people who weren't didn't sign up for Loom, but in the video, people had opportunities to then become Loom creators. So again, they reached out to surfaces, they reached out to places that was previously unreachable here. And again, it provides some additional exposure. And we see this not just in software, but we also see this in manufacturing. And in fact, the example that we have of this is Nike. Nike realized at some point that they were flying blind because they worked through large retailers such as Foot Locker and Dick's Sporting Goods and a few others here. And even though they had a partial eye on what was moving and what wasn't, they had little or no visibility on the customer journey. What caused them to think about, oh, I think I need a new shoe? Well, maybe I don't just need a new shoe. Maybe I need a Nike brand shoe. And then how's that person not just buy one Nike, but how could you discover patterns on, well, every time they need new shoes, they come to us first. So how do customers repeatedly buy? How do customers get to the point where now they're buying it for others? So again, it becomes that where they become the champion here. And part of the play then was creating an electronic distribution channel through their apps such as sneakers and apps, which gave them insights, which gave them a lot of analytics, gave them a lot of insights here, and gave them the ability to understand not just what to sell, but how much to sell, when to take it off market, when to bring it off market. They got so good at it though that they wound up what do you call it? They put themselves in a situation where they started creating gaps on the other side. In other words, they over rotated and realized that, oh, we need to bring back in some of these larger retailers. So now they've found some equilibrium. So that's where they got so good at it, they over rotated. And now they're rotating back towards the center, saying, hey, we need a mix of this, of our own platform, our direct to customer or DTC platform. And we need a direct to customer platform, but also we still need to work through some large retailers. I think, Kenny, you have some insights on this as well.
No, I mean, the key thing here to take away from this is that the innovation is driven by these new demands that happen, be it in new
Yeah.
channels, be it in new customers, be it in new geographies. And just rather than just adding features or adding components or adding capabilities into your product for the sake of adding them and think and hoping that they add value, they're driven by ways that you're going to grow your business. And the
Yeah.
growth models are driving that innovation and working together around that. And I think that's what Nike saw because fundamentally their product changed. How they
Yeah.
delivered their product, where they delivered their product was very different, in that first model where all they had to do was, you know, enable their wholesalers to take their product, ship it to them, and then let them figure out how to reach customers. Now they
Yep.
actually had to figure out who the customers were, what the value they needed is, and what their, how their shoes and eventually other products that Nike started to sell was
Right.
valuable in these other channels. And
And
inevitably conflict happened, and they had to then, that's where they went to the rebalancing to resolve some of the conflict between the channels that they had created. And
right.
again, it was the product that enabled them to do some of those things and
It
innovation,
was.
innovation in that product.
And now that they were more data led, now that they went through that data transformation, they were able to go ahead and exploit that next growth lever because that data allowed them to figure out what new products and services to offer as well. In other words, okay, so what I'm trying to say here is if you're getting those other three layers right, those other three motions here, then that puts you in a position of what do we build that's new? Quite often, and you and I have consulted many companies where they've just dove into what can we build that's new? And we have the conversation, well, what signals do you have from the market? They don't have signals. They say, well, what signals do you have from your own application? Well, we don't. We don't, well, what sort of analytics are you collecting in your product? We don't. So if you notice those first three plays done well are going to give you a data pipeline. And they're going to give you a data pipeline that then it's not about what features should we deliver next, but what workflows sit right outside of our current customers that are still underserved. Another word for that is what jobs to be done are very adjacent. So you notice that all these plays are adjacent. The first play was how is this design? Who is adjacent to the designer? A product manager, a developer, and then what countries are adjacent here, and then what channels are adjacent here. So you'll notice that this is another adjacency play where it says, hey, what are some jobs to be done, some underserved workflows? This is why you still have to have great design chops here. And then you get into thinking like, all right, where are some gaps that exist here? What happens that moment right before the person starts using our product? So, for example, and then what happens right before the handoff? Can we expand the product in those areas here? Can we expand the product on additional workflows they may be asked to engage in as part of their day-to-day work? So there's different ways we can expand that as well. Kenny, I'm sure you possibly seen this play made both good and bad a few times.
Yeah, I created a few new products, but it came from the core and an understanding of the core and who it was serving and how we
Right.
then served potential new customers, new scenarios, new workflows.
Right. Did you find adjacency was a
Yeah,
helpful in figuring out what's
it
next
definitely.
versus just
But
spin the wheel and pick the technology?
yeah, I mean, one of the big histories in this one, at least in my personal realm, was I was working for Microsoft and I was working on
Hmm.
the Office product, and we were
Right.
targeting how we could make better Office better for small businesses. And there were
Right.
lots of things we could do inside of Outlook or inside of Word or inside of Excel to enhance and evolve and make that product better for our customers. We then found a new use case. People were actually trying to sell things leveraging Office. Wasn't ideal
Right.
for it,
Right.
but they wanted to figure out how they could enhance their sales team. Again, it was a new customer, but it actually needed a new product to serve that, and that's why we created Microsoft CRM.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were running into the same thing over there at Citrix with a similar product of how, it's serving small SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses and going
Mhm.
into enterprise with their documents here. I was running up the search there and they were just putting in new products and features based off the technology that was available versus what is it they're trying to get done? What is the jobs to be done and what are the adjacent workflows here? So that sort of gives you an idea of the plays. I think the best example of this, GitHub Copilot, like it or hate it. I remember, I'm so old, I remember before Git. So Git was the original, what do you call it, version control. Before that, there was this monstrosity. Was CSV or CVS? I don't know. I've tried to psychologically block it. And before that, there was a few other, I mean, version control was just horrible growing up. It was like uphill both ways with no shoes in the snow. Git made it easy. GitHub then arose as the repo for open source. It was acquired by Microsoft, who has since moved the product from being mostly this DevOps like function and library to now, by the addition of Copilot, to help with the editor, do things like, hey, what name should I give this function? Now you're thinking, well, what's so important about that? Well, if you're working in some enterprise software with millions of lines of code, yeah, naming conventions becomes really important here. With AI code assistance, I want to go ahead and read this, this PowerPoint file. Well, that can be really great if you want to write the code yourself, but if you're using an AI assistant, it could say like, hey, there's a library for that. Let me pull that in for you and install that there. And then it takes on that enterprise adoption. So they've moved the product itself from just originally being this sort of a DevOpsy type of function here and elevating it now until it's this enterprise development type of environment. So, really good job of that, of understanding who their base customer was, understanding what the adjacent jobs to be done, understanding how engineers did it in different countries and different places because code's not the same region to region, understanding the different channels in which this was produced that gave them the insights of how to bring Copilot in to actually add some real guts to tools like such as VS Code and the GitHub repo in a way that helps and works with the way a lot of enterprises work. I mean, I know there's other tools and there's other popular tools here, but I think they've done a really good job with this. So probably the question starts coming up, Kenny, is, all right, you've shown me what, can you show me how? So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, all right, well, how do I even start this conversation? Don't worry. We've got a growth matrix, path matrix for you. All right. So don't let all the flashing colors, the different boxes scare you. This is nothing. This is really simple. If you look at the instructions, it's two sentences at the very top. For each question, provide one or two. So for each question in each box here, fill in the questions here. All right. Just answer two questions. Then pick the quadrant with the most evidence. Now, you'll notice, by the way, the degrees of change to your product. This 2x2 is set up by degrees of change versus understanding of your market as well, and helps paint the risk, which is why new products and services is the most risky because you're making the most change with the least amount of market knowledge. With geographies, you're making changes, but the changes are very scoped and focused around the culture, which you really don't know is the culture. The distribution channels have sort of a same flair to that, is that you'll probably have to make some changes, especially if you're taking your product and putting it into marketplaces, which is another way of getting more visibility. You'll probably have to make some more significant code changes. You'll still, and to your point, Kenny, you'll still have to make some code changes as you think about moving into those new segments here. Now, as you look at this thinking like, it seems like a lot of work. Do I really want to have this conversation here? Well, let me just say, no, you don't. There's an app for that. And now, not actually an app for that. There's a skill for that. So one of the things that, as we were talking about this, I said, I'm looking at this growth, this matrix that I just showed you. I said, is there a way I could do that in a tool such as Codex, Claude, ChatGPT? Well, if you're familiar at all with the concept of skills, and skills are nothing scary, skills are just basically a file of directions here. So if I could create a skill for organic growth as an advisor, maybe it can help me pick or at least recommend where I should think about growth next for my own product. Now, again, a skill is nothing but a set of instructions here. And by the way, we will share this with you, a link to this at the very end. So if you're saying, oh, where do I get this? We'll get you to it here. It's just a lot of instructions. And since we want to do this with some frequency, we don't want to have to sit there and rewrite it and type in a big, messy prompt. So I've already gone in and put in the prompt because it takes a few seconds to kick off. And it says, and like all our skills that we like to write, hey, I'm going to ask, since you didn't give me any context, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So where do you want to start? You want me to ask all 3 questions one at a time? Do you want to give me a dump? Do you want to give me a best guess? Now I'm going to go ahead and what? All right. I knew that might happen here. I'm going to go ahead and I got to copy and paste that again. So give me a second here. I I knew that would lose it. So I'm going to paste it in. So I've already got I'm going to say, I want option two. I'm going to drop on you some context. I'm a B2B product management tool for software engineers at mid-sized SaaS companies. Growth has been flat. We tried LinkedIn. We've tried free tiers. Nothing converted. Our best customers love us, but the word of mouth stops with the engineering team. So I give it some context here. And what I asked it to do is give me two recommendations. So now it runs the skill and it says, hey, I got one more question to ask you here. All right. Before we move any further, for those adjacent buyers inside the same companies, how much does this product need to change? All right. I'm going to say low ish, somewhere between low and mid. All right. So I give it that feedback there. And now it gives me two recommendations based on what we just talked about. Hey, we think you should probably look at new customer segments, the L2, which is the least risky play, by the way. And it gives me some pros and cons. It tells me why. It says, look, your best customers are engineering teams, design teams, product teams, QA leads. They're nearly identical here. The first experiment you might want to run might be pulling 20 accounts. Here's why, here's the risk level. Here are the downsides. And option two, a little riskier, might be new distribution channels. So it actually gives you some ideas, and then you could even go ahead and ask it more questions on give me a hypothesis that for the L2 option. So again, you can use AI to help you walk you through this here. You can do it with a prompt. I decided to do it with a skill because I want to do this more than once. I want to create some behaviors and some muscles there. You'll notice it actually writes a very formalized one. So that's a way of doing that through a skill. So again, we'll be sharing the link to that at the very end. And Kenny, I think it's time for a poll.
Oh yeah, let's put that second poll up there.
So the second
So
poll
now,
is
after you've learned all this neat stuff,
we've walked
what
through
will
a
you
lot
do
of
differently
things.
today?
Starting today, what will you do differently?
And I think they can answer multiples on this one, right?
They can. This is multiple choice. You just don't have to pick just one.
We'll give them a couple seconds for everybody to
Yeah, you got a couple
fill in
seconds
their
there.
poll.
Right. And for those who are waiting, we are going to give out the link to that skill set. You can take it and use it yourself in your own session, your own versions of Claude or Codex or whatever you're using if you know how to use skills.
And if while you're
Cool.
waiting, you have a question, you can throw it into that Q&A
Yes, we would
box
love some
for us.
questions here. Make them hard questions too.
All right.
All right, let's end the
Okay, we can
poll.
probably end the poll, share the results.
Here are the
Go ahead.
results. Pick
All
a
right, lots of
growth
people want to
path.
ask customers what job they're not solving.
Yes, right. Yeah, and I think that's a good question there. And I think the next one after that is pick a path before picking a tactic. So both
Yeah.
those make me happy. If that's all we left people with today, I think we can declare victory. So Kenny, I think you
Yay.
got a few offers.
Yeah.
We're going to share the link
Yeah.
and then we're going to have a Q&A session.
But we don't have much time for Q&A, but we actually have an in-person training session coming up in August. So any of you who are near the middle of the country, join us in Chicago. We're going to have fun getting down on Michigan Ave. So click that link and it'll allow you to enroll there. And if you're interested in other webinars that Productside's given, there's one coming in a few weeks, moderated by by Cynthia and then run by Rena Alexin, our CEO, about how is the role of product management changing? How can you become a big part of that? So
Yeah.
another
And
opportunity
in
there. And
today's
if you just want to get some random training, some other core training in the coming weeks, there are lots of opportunities on our website for you to interact and Dean has a couple of classes coming up in June and July. I've got another one in August. We've got that in-person one that Roger's given in August. And we're also teaching some more skills around AI that Dean's providing. One's coming up in the beginning of June, and then again, another one at the end of July. All of those
There
are
you go.
live online, so you don't even have to travel anywhere to get the training.
There's your skills, people. So if you want to try running your organic growth advisor skill, there's how you get it. You can just go to the repo, the link there, and that'll get you there. And
And
Kenny,
we've put all links to all of those in the chat, so you can click either use the QR codes or just click the links off your chat. And again, if you
yep,
have any questions, go put them in the Q&A panel. I don't see. Oh, I've got a couple of them. There's some questions we've got for Dean.
good.
Um, So one of them is when a stakeholder pushes for a new feature and calls it innovation, how do we raise that conversation about whether it actually moves any of the three levers around revenue adoption or retention?
Yeah, that sort of gets into how do you herd the dangerous animals when they have a lot of energy? Because they're going to be coming in with a lot of energy. They're probably going to be fired on that. And I always say this is a judo play, not a karate play. So a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is again not just saying no, it doesn't fit in here. Oh, that's a stupid idea, even though it might be a stupid idea. Um, but one of the things you can say, ask a question is, hey, this is interesting. How do you see the adoption path for this working? And you can say it very nicely. You can say, "Hey, this is interesting here. Do you see this as something that's going to create more customers, more and for the customers we have, do we think it's going to turn them into champions for us here? Tell me a little bit about your vision for that." So you're moving away from the feature a bit. So you're still not saying no. You're still talking about what they're talking about, but now you have that. So again, that's one way of doing that. I think the other way to do that is saying, this is interesting. Do you mind if we run a few tiny acts of discovery to see what the appetite in the market is for this? To see if we actually have an understanding of this. So those are two ways to manage that conversation. I think it can be very career limiting, especially depending on how high up the person is, just to flat out say no. And you may be missing out on an idea that's actually a good idea.
Or you can try to find how do we reframe the idea into something
Yeah.
that
Eh, eh,
fits and isn't just for look for those opportunities to grow your customer base or grow your opportunity base.
right, right. So that's at least that's how I would think you want to play that.
Yeah. And another one came up is that with, depending on who you ask, between 70 and 90% of new products being failures, how do you decide and make that jump to make that adjacent play of I'm going to go bet on a new product versus something that, might stay as maybe a partner integration or something like that.
So we're talking about a new product, and again, it's a similar play here. Part of that is sort of the discovery and trying to get an idea of the appetite. So it's a variance on what we just talked about here. Is how quickly can I get data here? One of the things we teach in the AI class is, do you have some inspirational success stories? Not that you're going to copy, because innovation is not about copying, but innovation is about being inspired. So, are there other companies who have made an adjacent play, who've made a similar play, who've made a play that, even though we're not going to do it exactly the way they did it, we feel like it's giving us, it's sort of been the Sherpa on how we do want to do that. So, along with running experiments, is possibly figuring out what's out there that's similar enough or adjacent enough that we could learn from.
And the other place to look, Dean, I think, is looking for gaps in needs fulfillment.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'll return back to the example I had when we made the decision of should Microsoft actually go create a CRM product. What we
Yeah.
found was there was a gap. At the time, there were lots of CRM products out there, but they were all
Right.
targeted at the enterprise. So they're big, complex workflows around, toolboxes that people had to customize, and small to mid-sized businesses didn't have the time, resources, or energy to go do that. We saw a
Yeah.
huge opportunity out there to go fill that gap. We had some assets that we could apply to it. It wasn't, a completely new opportunity for us, even though it was a new product. But
Yeah.
we found that gap in the needs fulfillment.
We saw that at a company at Seven Lakes where we were servicing upstream oil and gas production here, where we were told, oh, you got to chase this competitor, you got to chase this competitor. And both those competitors were all about the reports and compliance reports, which was become an uphill battle. And after talking to customers for a while, I started realizing our biggest competitor is not these people. There's a gap because so many people, because it's a lot of little operators who work in the industry. So it's all these little mom and pop shops that are all running as one. And most of them are running off of Excel spreadsheets using macros they created. And it was realizing like, the gap isn't so much getting them to use our product here in terms of we have a better way of doing the reports. We have a way of getting you out of spreadsheet hell, or at least out of, macro
So
purgatory.
yeah, I get it. So, Dean, I've seen that our clock has hit back to the top of the hour, and we've had so much
Excellent.
fun, and the hours felt like about 6 minutes. And hopefully, everybody on the call has enjoyed it as well. So, I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you, Dean, for the insight you provided over the last hour, and lots of learning people can have going forward from this one. So,
Yep.
join us for our next one. Feel free, and we'll enjoy.
Yep. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.